Hello and welcome to the CX Files podcast. I'm your host, Mark Hillary. Nicola Collister is the Group COO at Woven, based in the northwest of England. Woven is a customer service company that aims to focus on value creation rather than just cost reduction. As we know, this is quite different from the usual pitch a customer service supplier makes. I noticed a recent blog that Nicola wrote on LinkedIn where she said that the focus on the cost of customer service is killing innovation. So I called her up to ask about the blog and how the companies that do the really hard work, like running the contact center, can start to be seen as strategic partners rather than just suppliers all bidding for contracts at the lowest possible price. I saw your recent blog, Cost is Killing Innovation, and you outlined a variety of problems there, including customers that have got less patience today, more technologies available to brands for their customer service, and a focus on designing the CX itself just to lower the cost of servicing customers rather than actually improving the customer experience. I mean, is that really a summary of where we are today with CX strategy?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we take a step back and we think about, the drive to automation, probably going back about 10, 15 years ago now, I think, self-serve and automation really started at the outset of trying to reduce cost. It was about trying to reduce, contacts coming into a contact center. It was about, driving people to an IVR. It was about, driving people to some of the FAQs online. I think a lot of businesses have unfortunately got stuck in that drive to automation, which is about driving a customer to automation rather than actually standing back and saying, right, if we were to redesign this again, if we take a look at, some of the great experiences that the likes of, Amazon have created, the one-click service to checkout, they had the opportunity to build it from scratch and to design it from scratch. So I think if, as more organisations are doing now, if we could do more of that, stand back and say, if we were redesigning this and redesigning it with clear outcomes, so what's the customer trying to get out of this? What are we trying to, as a business, trying to achieve at the end of this? Then I think there would be certainly more innovation, there would be more customer focus, and certainly probably better outcomes for the customer and for organisations.
Yeah.
So I think we're seeing, to answer the question, I think we're seeing, we're seeing some great things, but equally there's still lots of stuff that's getting layered on top of, in effect, a journey that's broken or an experience that's broken and not fit for purpose, and it just needs probably throwing out the window and starting again.
Yeah, I mean, the Amazon's a good example there because I think one-click is 20 years old now, and yet you still have online shopping stores that are really difficult to navigate.
Yeah, absolutely. And, again, without, naming brands, but we've all experienced it where they've then got an app. And again, an app's not new. That's been around, for 10 years plus now. But the app experience is very different to the online experience. It's different to when you contact them and you get, pushed through an IVR and then eventually to, speaking to a human being. So it's the fact that as customers now, I think it probably plays into some of the other things that I've talked about in recent blogs. As customers, we don't think about channels. What we think about is what we're trying to achieve. What do we want from somebody that we're contacting, or what do we want from an organisation we might be interacting with? So it's that whole piece around, rather than we've just layered and layered and layered on top of stuff that's been there for years, rather than saying, let's stand back and actually redesign it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I saw some research in one of your blogs that mentioned that customers will pay extra. I think it was 66% of customers in America said that if they have the option for better service, but it requires a small fee, then they would be prepared to pay it. So why are we not tapping into this kind of sentiment more and actually focusing on improving service?
Yeah, and there was some additional research done by Ipsos Mori. I think it was going back a couple of years ago now. Ben Page talked about that, where it was, again, over 60% of customers would pay I think 5% more, and then there was a figure around 10% and so on. So, definitely, I think we've seen that actually. I can only talk about some recent UK brands statistics, but, where we're seeing there's a retailer in the UK and they've got a food proposition attached to that retail proposition. And actually the food proposition is doing, it's actually, I think, 7-8% up year on year. So, we are prepared to pay more for better service, but likewise we want the convenience offer. So there's certain things we'll do where we just want the convenience, and therefore we know what we pay for and we know the service we're going to get. But where we want a better experience, then we are prepared to pay more for that. So it is interesting, and I think one of the things that's again probably driving almost less of this happening is, more and more businesses now are focused on what I call short-termism. So, it's almost say, what are the results in this financial year, what we're trying to achieve in this period, next month, next week. It's very difficult now, I think, for organisations to have, sort of 5 to 10 year plans. I think those are almost, not non-existent now. Almost long-term planning now is looking at what do we do in the next 2 to 3 years if we're lucky. So I think the short-term focus is driving, cost out. It's driving immediate results rather than actually focusing on what could we do to drive a better experience, and therefore back to this piece around customers might therefore be prepared to pay slightly more for that.
Yeah, that's interesting about the planning, because I saw in your blog you also mentioned that around half of companies that go out looking for a supplier to manage their customer service operation, they expect that supplier to be innovative and to be actually, like, innovation should be part of the deal itself when they partner up with somebody. So how come, the reality, the end of the day, we often just see outsourcing contracts focused on price rather than, lifetime value and improved customer experience?
Yeah, and I've been on client side, not necessarily on the outsourcing side for many years of my working career, and that's always been, it's been a frustration for me. But likewise, I've probably been on client side and driven some of that because of the pressures from the finance function, from CFOs, from procurement. I think one of the biggest drivers of the fact that we're not changing the way in which we partner with businesses or we procure services is because of the processes that we do when we go to an RFP proposal. So, a lot of it is based around the how are you going to cost it, how are you going to contract, rather than standing back and saying, well, what outcomes are we trying to achieve? We're very good at measuring all the inputs, and contracts will talk about, what's your price per seat or your price per hour or your price per unit cost of things. And those are predominantly inputs. Whereas if we stand back and say, well, actually, what we're trying to do now is deliver outcomes. We're trying to deliver a better customer experience. We're trying to deliver, a better sales outcome, a service outcome, innovation outcome. It might actually be about reducing contact, because we want to do things more digitally, the use of robotics, use of push notifications. We're in an exciting time, I think, where we're seriously going to have to stand back collectively across the whole industry, client side, buyer side, seller side, procurement side, finance side, and start to look at things differently, the way in which we can procure services and partner with companies, because of all the things that are in the mix now. But yeah, I think certainly the shift to more outcome-based partnerships and pricing models, we're going to see more of that in the future.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I saw a really interesting stat that you put in your blog where you said 45% of customers think that actually calling a customer service center is going to be the quickest way to fix their problem, but 65% of them would rather stick their head in a toilet. So that's, I mean, are we actually measuring the right things? Because a lot of the measurements and metrics we see in the contact center are very much focused on voice calls, first call resolution, the length of the calls, and it's like you just mentioned that we might see a reduction just because of different channel use and more self-service. But all of these metrics are focused on complaint calls, I think, post-purchase complaints rather than engagement, building a relationship.
Yeah, it is, as you say. I mean, I laughed when I saw that that statistic around, people would rather stick their head down the toilet, and it's quite sad actually, because I'm proud to work in the service industry, and I have done, for 25 years plus, and started my career actually to breakdown organisation, taking calls in a contact centre. So I think it's quite a sad, almost indictment of how customers feel in some cases about the industry. But actually, if we stand back, you can understand it, because I know now, if I want to get some information or have an interaction with a company, I don't necessarily think first and foremost about picking the phone up. Most of us now will go to an app, we'll ask Alexa, we'll go to Google Assistant, we'll do a number of things. And I think that's not just our generation or, the younger generations. I know my father, my parents actually that are late 60s, that their immediate reaction is to go to the internet and have a look for stuff. So I think we are, again, this probably comes back to the cost is killing innovation piece, in that it's not naturally the first thing a customer thinks about doing. Ringing somewhere or sending an email or sending even a message, a web chat, doing live chat, sending a WhatsApp message. That's not necessarily where they may start their journey. So they're probably going to start the journey in a more digital way. And yet we don't always necessarily design those interactions with an organisation in the most customer friendly or customer useful way. So I think it comes back to the piece where we need to stand back, almost really step into the shoes of, we're all customers ourselves. What would we ask and how would we interact with that organisation, and then stand back and to design that from scratch. Then to speak to a company, because I was getting confused, to be fair, by some of the information it was telling me online. When you then want to pick up the phone and speak to someone, then, you want to speak to somebody who understands where you've been before, is knowledgeable, empathetic, understands your situation, and then, it might not be able to resolve it first time, but they're going to go off and find that information and come back to you. And I think all too often now, we're getting passed from pillar to post. Actually, they don't, the poor advisor doesn't understand where we've been before, what we've done on an app or what we've asked Alexa. And we just need to, we collectively in the industry need to work hard to help our contact centres and to help join up that experience for customers.
Yeah, I mean, because at the end of the day, the customer wants answers to their problem, not like a choice of multi-channel access points. It's interesting what you just mentioned about Alexa and Google, because I was thinking about this. If I just buy a new television from Samsung, then I have a problem setting it up. The first thing I'm going to do is Google or ask Alexa for help. Do you think are the brands really thinking about what's in those search results and building that into a sort of like a first point of customer service?
I think there are some brands that actually are doing that brilliantly. There's definitely, I think the great news is there are brands out there that are truly doing that, and with digital innovation and looking at AI and looking at what all of these things are doing from a voice help and joining that up. But again, I definitely know all organisations are not doing that, and I think more organisations do need to, as you say, stand back and say, so what's happening, not just in static web search terms, but how would a customer ask Alexa for something? So, what words would they use? What phrases? How would they construct it? And also what context? So what context are they doing it in? Are they stood in the kitchen? Are they stood next to the TV asking Alexa? Is it their child stood next to them? I think it's the what they're asking, but it's also the how and the way in which they're asking it. It's about stepping back into the customer's shoes really and understanding the behaviours, and ultimately what outcome is it that they're looking for.
Yeah. I mean, summarizing all of these different problems that we've talked about, and certainly this conversation started because your blog focused on cost killing innovation. I suppose at the end of the day, we still see the lowest bid normally winning the contract to provide customer services. So is there a fundamental change or a change of attitude or strategy that the entire industry needs to adopt?
Yeah, absolutely. Don't get me wrong. With it still, there are still, as you say, big volume contracts out there, which is just, well, not just, but it's about, answering contacts effectively and efficiently. But I think there are more and more brands, and there are more and more businesses, and more and more service providers where certainly that's what Woven is about standing back and saying, it's not a volume play. This is not a race to the top line, or equally, a race to the bottom line. It's about standing back and really understanding what is it we're trying to achieve. What are the outcomes? Those outcomes actually might be zero contacts. We don't want any contact with our customers, because it all works so seamlessly that in effect what you're doing is just helping orchestrate that. And that might be helping orchestrate people. It might be helping orchestrate, robotics, chatbots. It might be orchestrating a whole series of things, knowledge content. But I think definitely it's now. I think now is the time, because we've got access to all of this technology. We've got access to the data. It's much easier now to join these things together, that we need to stand back really and look at outcomes that customers are looking for, outcomes that the business wants, and redesign that.
Thanks for listening to the CX Files podcast. Please take a moment to review the podcast, because this helps other listeners to find it. And if you have any suggestions, then get in touch with me on Twitter or LinkedIn. I am @Mark Hillary with 2 L's, or just search Google for Mark Hillary.